What are 4 things you should include in your commercial real estate due diligence survey? Before we answer that question, let's explain a couple of the terms in there. What do I mean when I say due diligence survey? Due diligence, that means you're being a prudent buyer, right? You're asking questions, you're poking around, you're lifting up the rug, you're pulling open the basement door, you're snooping around, right? You want to make sure you know exactly what you're buying. It's really important in commercial real estate. You want to be a prudent buyer. So a prudent buyer is doing their due diligence. They're checking stuff out. You want to make sure that when you're involved in a commercial real estate transaction, especially as a buyer, that you get a due diligence survey. Get a survey. You can't properly do due diligence. Let me reword that. You can't properly execute due diligence as part of a commercial real estate transaction without a survey, period, full stop. So you need to get a survey as part of your due diligence. Even if the bank isn't making you, you should still get a due diligence survey. Most of the due diligence surveys we do are because the bank wants the survey, not because the buyer wants the survey. That's a shame. Buyers should want a due diligence survey even if the bank doesn't. So be a smart buyer. Don't be a foolish buyer. Get a survey. It's a wise investment, and for most commercial real estate transactions, it's a tiny percentage of the overall transaction cost. So it's a good investment. So what are the 4 things that you should ask for on a due diligence survey, now that we're talking about that? Now, typically those take the form of a land title survey or what's called an ALTA survey, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be an ALTA survey. So if the bank's not making you get a survey and you want to be a prudent buyer, you want to make sure that you get a good due diligence survey, what are 4 things that you need to ask for? And this is important. I want to teach you this because you don't want to go pay money for a survey and then not get what you need to properly execute your due diligence. So you want to make sure that you ask for the appropriate things from the land surveyor, right? You want to communicate exactly what you're doing. I'm involved in a real estate transaction. I'm performing my due diligence, and these are the things I need to have on your survey. Okay, so what do you want to ask for? 4 things. You want the parcel boundary on the survey. Now that seems obvious, right? Of course I want the parcel boundary. Okay, but it's not just a thick dark line, right, that goes around the parcel. An architect can do that. Okay, so what do you want on the parcel boundary? You want to make sure it shows the found monuments, the monuments that the surveyor looked for but didn't find, any corners that aren't marked by a monument, bearings and distances or curve info around the boundary line. You want some notes on the method that the surveyor used to resolve the boundary. That should be very clear on the face of the survey. And then you want the surveyor to indicate on the survey, usually in a note, what his level of certainty or uncertainty is, or her level of certainty or uncertainty on each of the boundary lines, right? So people assume sometimes that when they get a boundary survey, that means wherever that surveyor decided to put the line on the map is where it's at. That's not true. Not all boundary lines are certain. There is some uncertainty built in to all boundary surveys, so you want to make sure you understand that. You need to understand that uncertainty and the risk it creates, so ask your surveyor to communicate that to you on the survey. Okay, so that's the first thing, parcel boundary. There's some different parts to that, right, that I listed there. The second thing is you absolutely want to show easements and leases, so make sure that the surveyor puts that on the due diligence survey, okay, and he needs to show you the location of the easements and leases, the type of easement or lease. Is it for utilities? Is it for access? Is it for, navigation and fisheries? Whatever. There's all kinds of different stuff. What's the source of the easement? So is it a map? Is it a deed? Is it a specific easement deed? Have them put the source and the recording information on the survey. Have them indicate or her indicate if she knows, if the surveyor knows who holds the easement. Is it the utility company? Is it the county? Is it a private party? That can usually be identified and it should be put on the survey. Okay, so the third thing is structures. If there's buildings or other types of structures on the parcel, you want to have the surveyor show that. At least the basic footprint. I've got another video that talks about the different types of areas that are building areas that you can have surveyed. Make sure you have a conversation with your surveyor about that, but at least get the basic drip line footprint of the structures and the other details that you might want to know. How many doors is there? How many pedestrian doors? How many vehicle doors? Where does the driveway go? Where are the utilities at that serve the building? Whatever you need to know about the buildings, make sure you get it on the survey. That may be something you want to talk to your appraiser or your building inspector about, what information should be shown on the due diligence survey. The last thing, number 4, is you want to get some land use information on your survey, shown on your survey. So you want to know what's the zoning, have the surveyor put that on there, have them plot the building setbacks if the building setbacks apply, have her show important jurisdictional boundaries. So if there's a city limit line or there's a business improvement district boundary or things like that, ask for that to be put on the survey. Show other restricted areas. So it's not just building setbacks. For example, in one of the counties where I do a lot of my work, we have a buffer that is in place next to riparian corridors, what they call riparian corridors. So it's along creeks and rivers. You can't build within that buffer zone. So that should be shown. Those kind of restricted areas should be shown. And then you can also ask your surveyor, based on the building setbacks and the other restrictions, land use restrictions, to show you your buildable envelope. In other words, what could I theoretically build on, right? That's not an engineering calculation. That's based on the land use restrictions that apply to a parcel. So those are the 4 things, all right? Just to review: the parcel boundary with some supporting information, easements and leases with some supporting information, the footprint of structures, and some land use information. All that needs to be on the due diligence survey. Remember, this is a partnership between you, the client, and your boundary surveyor, right? So there's some back and forth involved. Make sure that you understand that you have to pay your surveyor for everything she puts on your due diligence survey. Make sure you communicate to your surveyor what your goals are for the project or the transaction, what's most important to you, and what your level of risk tolerance is. You know, I can handle a lot of risk, or I need this thing airtight. If there's any problems whatsoever with property, you need to tell me. You know, communicate that. And then remember, there's some things that you need to provide. So you might need to provide a zoning report or a land title report or other information, depending on what you ask the surveyor for. You know, you may need to give your surveyor, she may need access to the buildings or to other restricted parts of the property. So remember, it's a partnership. But now you know 4 things that you should get on any due diligence survey for commercial real estate: the parcel boundary, the easements and leases, the structures, and the land use restrictions.